Welcome to Paralegal or Bust, where we discuss my journey into becoming a paralegal. I'm your host, Cassidy Bass. This is the Halloween special, and today we have Professor Gail. If you can, Professor Gail, just go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Gail Dorn. I'm the professor and director of paralegal studies at Del Mar College, and I am a lawyer. And I am helping Cassidy on her journey to becoming a paralegal.
Thank you, by the way. You're an amazing professor. I just wanted to start off with asking you what interested you in becoming a paralegal.
When I was in what we call junior high in my day, you guys now call middle school, we had a lawyer that was a neighbor, and he used to see me reading all the time, walking to school. Sometimes I'd be reading while I was walking to school, and good deductive reasoning there, picked up in the fact I was a reader. So he had gotten a bar journal. It was in the state of Nebraska, and he had received a bar journal where they were talking about this new educational process called legal assisting, which we now call paralegal studies. And he just visited with me about it, thought it might be something I'd be interested in. So when I was ready to go on to school, I went to a junior college, a community college now. We called them junior colleges back then. My first 2 years, freshman and sophomore, I went to the junior college, got my Associate of Arts degree. And then when I went to get my bachelor's degree is when I looked for a paralegal or then legal assisting program and went to Northern Arizona University, had a 4-year program that was approved by the American Bar Association.
Oh, so they were ABA approved.
Yes, it was either one of 11 or one of 17 in the country at the time. Now I think we have 260 approved paralegal programs in the country.
And can you just explain to the listeners like what an ABA approved program is?
A paralegal studies program, they're typically 2 years of paralegal training. Either you're getting it at the Associate of Arts or Associate of Applied Science level, which is your freshman and sophomore year. Then they have the 4-year programs. In the 4-year programs, you do the paralegal training in your junior and senior year. And then they also have advanced certificates that once you have an Associate of Arts degree or a bachelor's degree or maybe even a master's degree, then you get this advanced technical certificate where you're trained just in paralegal courses. And then they also have a master's level in some, like Georgetown, I think University has a master's level program. We actually used to have an adjunct that taught here that had a master's in paralegal.
Oh, wow.
So they have different levels of it. And ABA, then the American Bar Association, if you want to become ABA approved, you file an application, and then you gather tons of data. It's an incredible amount of work. And then they actually come in and look at every aspect of your program. They look at your instructors. They look at if you're the director of a program, they look at your time you give to the program versus what you have to give to the college. They look at how you're staffed, what kind of resources you have. They look at your actual courses. They actually go in and look what you teach, how you teach it, projects you come up with, kinds of tests you give. I mean, they just get down to the minute detail of what you do to train paralegals. And then if you pass muster, they approve you. And it's a 7-year approval. And then they do about between year 3 and 4. They come in and do an interim report, make sure you're doing things you're supposed to do, and then you come up for reapproval every 7 years.
Nice. So once you graduated as a paralegal, what type of law did you end up getting into first?
My first job was with a trial lawyer, a litigator. He did both plaintiff's work, which means you represent the person who is injured and wants to sue somebody for their right to do so. To recover for the harm done to them. He also did defense work, which means you defend the people that have been sued. And then and he did mostly products liability type, and he did some criminal work, but I didn't do that much criminal part of it. I did the investigation part, but I didn't actually go to court and do that type.
Oh, okay.
So I did mostly investigations for him.
Was there like a certain type of law that you just really wanted to get into?
Yes, I wanted to work for a real estate lawyer.
Oh.
And I wanted to do title work, I have a real good attention to detail. I'm a very, as Ms. Bass can tell you, be a bit of a critical person, which I think is an absolute necessity to either be a paralegal or a lawyer. You have to be able to be critical about not only your own stuff, but what other people do, because ultimately what most things we do will become a public record.
Yeah.
And lawyers love it to be right. The law's got to be correct, but they also want it to look good, and they don't want to be made to look silly because they have a typo or something in the document. Sounds kind of silly, but hey, it's reality.
So, is there any other types of law that you've worked in that you'd like to touch on?
I had a general practice as a practicing attorney. I did Social Security, help people get on Social Security. We did mostly personal injury work. As a paralegal, I worked in corporate law. I worked for a corporation, a national corporation in Washington, D.C., where I did mostly research and investigations for them also. I worked for a tax lawyer in Pensacola, Florida. I worked in a law firm in Texas, a couple law firms. And I also worked for a radiologist as his office manager, which was quite an experience. And I had quite a few jobs over the years, but I liked it, and I liked them all. The only place I never really worked was as an administrative paralegal. Didn't really do that, but I did a lot of administrative work, but not as an employee of an administrator agency. Yeah.
Is there any moment as a paralegal that you remember that's just like so amazing or touching, or something that you look back on and you're like, wow, I was so happy I was a paralegal and I helped?
Everything you do in this profession, you're helping somebody, typically. I mean, whether you're helping a plaintiff recover for an injury, or whether you're helping a defendant who's defending themselves who injures somebody, whether you're helping somebody who's been charged with a crime, the whole kind of concept and definition of what we do is helping. So you've got to kind of have that part. But the one thing I think my first paralegal job, the first job I got out of college, was my first job of ever working with somebody other than working under my parents' thumb. Which talk about, hard employers. But the lawyer that I worked for was very well known. He was a very big lawyer in terms of his capability. He was well known. He was probably considered the best lawyer in the state. But he was also a very big personality. He was a very probably kind of built my first level of turtle skin, I call it. That he had a case where he had to be in court at 1:00 on a criminal matter. And he threw the file on my desk and said, yeah, get the client there and tell him to be there by 1:45 so I can visit with him and tell him to, bring money. So, I'm scared of this guy. I was kind of scared of him. So of course, it's like 11. And so I start looking for this guy. So I do all the usual. I go through the file like you're supposed to. I get his address. I find out where he works. I go through the whole process. So the first thing I do is I go over to his house. I'm thinking, well, he'll probably come home for lunch. People didn't eat out much in those days. So he didn't come home for lunch. And so that, got me to about 11:30. I thought, well, he probably won't come home till lunch. Like how my fiance to stand vigil over the apartment. Then I called his work and they said, oh, no, he didn't come in today. Yeah, they said I'm starting to get nervous.
Oh, wow.
So I was so thin when I was younger. I was scared all the time. Great weight loss program, paralegalist. But so I started getting more nervous. I was just scared he was going to yell at me. And so I finally called back to his work. And I thought, okay, come on, Gail, be a paralegal, right? Ask questions. Go on. So I asked a whole bunch of questions where he might be. And they said, well, I think he was going to a funeral today. And I said, okay, so I'm smart. I said, okay, a funeral. It means there's going to be a funeral on. There's only 4 in town. And because it was a small town, small compared to Corpus, about 20,000 people. So I called all the funeral homes and nobody was there. So I called back to work because I didn't ask the big question, where might this funeral be? And so she said, well, I think the funeral, so I called her back. I said, well, do you know where it was? And she said, well, I think it's in Minden. Minden's a town, just it's got like 3 houses and that's it. And the most incredible museum you'll ever go to, just like a little plug there for Minden, Nebraska. But it has this incredible museum. It's like 5 blocks long. So anyway, I called down, and Minden had one funeral home, and yes, he was a pallbearer at a funeral home. So I said, can I talk to him? Get him on the phone. And I said, yeah, you need to meet Jim over at the courthouse at 1:45. And he said to go ahead and, bring money. And he says, well, question I should have asked, how much? I went, so I'm thinking, well, I don't know. And I didn't ask, how much do you want me to have me bring? Duh. So I said, $500. And he says, well, how does he want it? I said, cash. Can't go wrong with cash, right? So I sent him, and he showed up, and the boss came back. He was never, and lawyers are not real good about giving kudos. They never usually say thank you. They never apologize. And so I'm kind of used to that. I'm probably kind of that way myself a bit. Not really what I'd call warm and fuzzy. He walks into my office. He was a big man, not only, reputation-wise, stature-wise. He walked into my office. He looked at me. He threw the file down. And I'm thinking, he goes another layer of turtle skin. Throws the file down. He looks over at the bookkeeper who was in the room with me, and he looks at me and he says, give her the day off and give her a bonus of $100. Doesn't sound like a lot to you guys, but, 1978, that was a lot of money. And so I took the day off.
Oh, wow.
So that was his way of saying I did okay. So he walks out, and he's not one to do that. And Ethel, who was the bookkeeper, turns to me and says, what did you do? So I told her the story. And she says, hey, God, he only charges $145. So she's like, that price just went up. So I did pretty well, I guess, with fee collecting, which you're not supposed to do as paralegal, by the way. But so it was kind of funny. So, no, so when people say bring money, you always say, how much do you want them to bring? Oh, that's kind of one of my favorite stories, my first experience of investigating a real case.
Now, do you have a story that was just the worst time ever? Maybe even made it to where you're like, I don't want to be a paralegal. Forget this. I'm leaving. I'm done. Just getting out of the legal field.
As a paralegal, I never had that.
No.
I loved it. I mean, and even now as a lawyer, I mean, I was a paralegal for 5 years before I became, went to law school. But that's one thing I've never regretted. I loved every moment of it. But one thing that happened that was kind of a sad story, but it was a real lesson for me in perception, and that we had a client that was incredibly burned. I mean, just horrible. Her skin melted. It was kind of one of those deals. You work and you're getting ready for trial. You're getting everything done. The lawyer was there. It wasn't just me. And so the lawyer says, well, hey, let's go get some lunch. And the client says, well, I can't go to lunch. And he said, well, no, we can go. And, are you busy or you got something? He said, no, I can't go to lunch. He said, what are you crazy? And the lawyer said, well, no, what do you mean? What am I crazy? Of course you can go to lunch with us. And he said, no, I make people visibly sick when they see me. He said, I can't go to eat in a restaurant. He said, I've never gone to a restaurant since I've had these injuries. And he looks to me and says, well, go pick us up some stuff and bring it back. And that's what we did. And, you get so used to seeing somebody. I didn't really see the scars anymore. I didn't really notice, that what he looked like. And that was, I don't know, that just really stuck with me my whole life. And so now when I think of things and I try to teach my paralegals this, maybe I should tell them the story. I don't know. But, I always now, every time I see something, hear something, think of something, I always tell myself, how does somebody else look at that? And not just my perception, because, I thought he was a great guy. But we also learned from that, in that when we went to trial, we did not have him sit through the trial. We had him come at certain moments, because the same thing would have happened to the jury. They would have become desensitized to really how horrible he was scarred. And you didn't want that, because, you can't put people back the way they were. I mean, all they can get are monetary damages. That's our system of justice. And so, so we kind of learned from that, when we brought him back for a final argument, the jury is still just totally shocked at, what bad shape he was. But I don't know. I mean, it was a kind of an eye-opening moment, but to me it was a really sad moment that, they really, truly, an injury ruined a person's life. I mean, totally. He could never do You know, his kids were scared of him for like 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, I mean, just think what that would be like to just be a monster. People just think you're a monster just because of the way you look.
And his burns, do you know the degree? Like, was it?
Oh, yeah, they were the maximum.
Wow.
Even with the plastic surgery, they couldn't fix it.
And
his
what
eyes were melted shut, part of him. His mouth was partially melted. Part of his nose was melted. I mean, your skin melts.
Yeah.
When you burn.
So was it his, like, face all
Everything.
down?
Entire body.
Oh, my God.
Fingers were wedded together. And he did. He just looked like, you know, he didn't look human. But I didn't like him. He was a great guy.
Yeah.
I got kind of used to him. I mean, you got to the part where you didn't even see that. You didn't even notice that was just him. But, you know, some of the stories he would tell were just, you know, it's just, I mean, just imagine what that would be like. You know, children won't hug you. I mean, his kids wouldn't even look at him for like 2 years because he was in such horrific shape. So I learned a lot from that. And it really left a great impression on me about you've always got to look at everything from somebody else's perspective to get it, you know, to truly be able to handle the case properly.
Yeah.
For a situation.
Wow. Well, so what interested you in becoming an attorney?
I didn't want to be an attorney. Two things, I guess. Every job I worked at, they always said that. You know, you really need to go to law school. You know, you need to move on. You need to get a law degree. You just need to do that. So I kind of, and in the last place I worked before I went to law school, really pushed me, gave me a lot more parameters as a paralegal, working under his supervision. And of course I love research. I'm really good at it. And I love school. And so I thought, well, that'd be kind of fun. And so when we moved to California, I thought, yeah, you know, I'll just go to law school. And it was a great experience. Had a blast. Nobody has a blast in law school unless you've been a paralegal first. I swear to God, that's true.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of familiar with it, so it's not as stressful as it is to people that have never really been part of the system.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I had a blast in it. But paralegal's still the best.
Yeah.
Still's the best.
So as an attorney, is there any type of law you'd want to work in now?
I don't know. You know, I've done everything pretty much except criminal, and I don't do much family law unless it's, you know, we don't fight over pots and pans. Basically we did money cases. I did a lot of civil rights work. You know, I'm thinking when I retire, because I'm not getting any younger, even though I'm taking these pills. And I'd kind of like to do something, I think, more on the parameters of working in the legal field, but doing something like the Innocence Project or something like that. I think I'd like to do something like that. Right now, my goal is to work with the legislature and maybe try to get licensing for paralegals in Texas. It's kind of my new big goal.
I like that. Yeah.
But I don't know. I've pretty much done it all. Civil rights, employment law, and stuff.
Yeah. So what brought you to Del Mar?
I was an adjunct here for 5 years. I taught law office technology in a totally different format than it is now. When I came, there was very limited hands-on type, giving kind of the big picture of what being a paralegal is. So I developed that class in my own format. And then when the two people before me retired, I applied for the job. I took the job. And the reason I did that is by that point, the lawyer that I worked with here in Corpus was getting older, kind of starting to slow down. He was 20 years older than I was. Just, you know, starting to kind of slow down. And I didn't really want to quit, but I didn't really want to go to work for somebody else. I didn't really want to, you know, put out my own shingle. So I thought, you know, it's kind of a way to give back. And I've always been interested in paralegal. I always thought this program needed something that was more, I don't know. I didn't really feel like the paralegals coming out of the program really had true paralegal training. They were more like, I would call a highly educated clerical type work as opposed to really thinking, the critical thinking aspects of what we do. So I thought it was kind of an opportunity to maybe do well, I thought, for Del Mar, and kind of my way to give back. You know, if we take from the system, we should give back to it. I'm a strong believer in that.
Definitely.
If you don't do it while you're working, you should do it at some time in your life.
So when you started here, was the program already ABA approved?
The program was started in 1973. It taught its first classes in September of, I'm sorry, did I say 1973 is when we're on our 50-year anniversary. In 1973, they taught In 1982, they sought and obtained ABA approval, and they were ABA approved from, I'm sorry, I said that wrong again. I even wrote it down. I can't read it. Put my glasses on. I know if you're thinking. They were approved in 1976, and then the person who took over the program just let it go in 1982. And so then when I came back on, that was one of my goals, was to get it ABA approved. I told that to the school, that that's what I wanted to do. They supported it wholeheartedly. So we then, when I took over, we got our ABA approval in 2019, and we will be up for reapproval in 2025.
Nice. Okay. So are you still an attorney?
Well, yes, of course. I do everything I'm supposed to do. I still do some practice, but not as active. I've been busy closing in the estate for the lawyer that I worked with who died a couple years ago. Closing a law office is quite a project. But yes, I still keep my certificate. I still keep up my continuing legal education. I stay active in the community, and because I'm not actually representing many, I got a couple, but I don't really represent actively a full practice. I kind of like to write papers.
Yeah.
Write and present papers. That's kind of fun.
So I'm going to hit this one more time. So since this is our Halloween special, can you give me somewhat of like a spooky, maybe sort of out of the normal paralegal or attorney story?
Yeah, we had a case where a lady got, they overbooked the plot. And then the family that wanted the plot had booked it first.
So in like a graveyard.
Yes. So they evicted our lady out of her last burial spot. Oh. And I'm going to tell you all the gory all the details, because there's a lot of legal aspects to it. But when we went, we resolved the case, and part of the resolution of the case was to move her to a new spot. So to be assured that everything was copacetic, they decided that we would start with the actual digging of the grave, then putting her in, and then ultimately they had a later funeral at a later time. So we didn't go from burial to burial, but we went from buried to unburied. So so they did, they brought a backhoe out, they dug up the spot, and then they got the big giant clamper things, whatever they're called, and pulled the coffin out of the grave. And the coffin was in the concrete box.
Okay, so it wasn't like a wooden coffin?
That was, well, we'll get to that.
Oh.
So they pulled up the concrete box that it's in. It's supposed to keep you all preserved and all of that in there. And as they pulled it up, and I'll back up a little bit, I dressed for the moment. This was in July or August. I was in city shorts. I had like a camisole on. I wore a little short sleeve jacket. I had my hair in a ponytail. I wore sandals, and I was ready for it. And my co-counsel, the defense lawyer, was in a suit with a tie.
And this in Corpus?
In August, July or August, in Corpus, in the middle of the cemetery. And so they dug it up, and when the backhoe or the clamper, I don't know, whatever those things are, pull you out of the ground, pulls her out of the ground, and it's like a reverse waterfall of roaches came up. A gabillion, that's even a word. Gazillion roaches came up out of the ground, up to the top, and were just like everywhere. And luckily we were standing back far enough, it wasn't too bad. And my client is standing there, the son, and he's standing there. And it's hard. It was hard for him to see his mother pulled out like that. And so the lawyer, brilliant move, is me, client, lawyer. The client turns around to the front of the lawyer, or front of the client, looks at me and says, "What do they eat down there?" And I said, "Gas." And then I look at I points to my client like, "Shut up." So he got it, and so anyway, they move it over. They have to take the metal, I can't remember what those are called. They have a name. Anyway, they take the lid off, the concrete lid off, and inside is a coffin that looked like it was wood when they sold it.
Oh, what?
It wasn't. It was wood. It was balsa wood, which is basically sawdust wood. And so being down there in that water, and it was 8 years. She'd been buried 8 years. And so when they brought it up, they took it off, the coffin was all swollen, and so they kind of had to peel that off. And I personally thought it was awesome. But anyway,
Yeah.
nobody else, they were looking kind of peaked. So anyway, they peeled it off, and she was in the coffin. And it's cool. It really was. I don't know if any of you are even old enough or listening to this ever saw that show, Tales of the Crypt. Tales from the Crypt. That was what it looked like.
Oh, wow.
I mean, she was a skeleton, but her hair had continued to grow.
Mhm.
So her hair was much longer. Her fingernails were like 4 inches long because,
Yeah.
we're made out of stuff, right? So the fingernails continued to grow. They made the determination of the family that one of the family members was going to go see. They wanted to be able to determine if it was really her.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't know what kind of shape it would be in. But it was so funny when it's not funny, haha. But when they opened it up and I looked in there and saw the family decided none of them could do it. I mean,
Yeah.
that was her mother.
Yeah.
So I went back in there and I said, okay, you're going to have to give me some details. He said, well, she was holding a rosary and this is what was on the rosary. She had this kind of printed dress and the dress was faded, but you could still see some of the print, some of the color. And so I went up and so the funeral director standing over me,
Mm-hmm.
he was a real tall man, and I get down and I just dive in. Now I go into the coffin to look at the dress,
Yeah.
look at the rosary beads, and all of a sudden his hand comes and grabs me by the collar and yanks me back up.
Wow.
And he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm seeing if this is her. I mean, we all kind of figured it was
Yeah.
because of the names and stuff. And he says, do you know how much disease and germs
Oh, yeah.
and just
I've
stuff
been-
is in a
oh,
dead
yeah.
body? And I said, well, it doesn't look like a dead body anymore. It looks more like a skeleton. And he's like, there's just a lot of stuff in there. You can't breathe that.
Oh, yeah.
You just can't. So they're and of course, they're all hovering over me. And I was kind of petite and stuff. And so they're all hovering over me. So they give me a mask to wear and stuff. And so as they're putting the mask on, I turned to the funeral director because you couldn't see me talk early, and I said, you might want to do something about my co-counsel, because I said, I think he's about to pass out. And apparently when I dove down into the coffin, it was too much. And he literally, it was so cool. He just looked over and he did this thing with his index finger.
Mm-hmm.
And he just did like a little signal. And the two people standing by him, he slammed a chair into the back of his knees,
Mm-hmm.
forced him to sit down, and right then they had orange juice.
Oh.
And they just made him drink it.
He was ready to pass out.
Yeah, he was.
Oh, we're
all
not.
faint. I got quite a reputation in town. I won't say on the air, but they said what a tough person I was, but which I took as a real compliment.
Yeah.
But
Definitely.
but it was but it took all day. We started at 6:30 in the morning and we didn't finish until about 9 o'clock that night.
Oh, but you were able to look at her, identify her, and then
I did based on what the
they had given
what a
you,
rosary looked like, and we decided not to take pictures, even though the funeral home ultimately did. We photographed every step.
oh, okay, just
Correct, but it was that surely was the
Wow.
coolest experience I've had as a lawyer.
yeah.
It's just,
And so you were
It's
a
already
lawyer
happened.
at that time.
I was,
Yes. Okay.
yeah, I
Wow.
was. But it was
That's interesting. That's
Yeah.
definitely some tells from our attorney, not tells from the crypt. Wow.
so.
Well, Professor Gell, it's coming time to the end. So I thank you so much for your time. I thank you for answering all my questions as well as giving some information. Do you have any advice or anything you'd like to leave us with?
Now, if you're interested in the law, it's a great occupation, and it's a fun occupation if you make it fun, but it can also be very stressful. So in any job you have, the one thing you need to really learn to do is take time for yourself and enjoy what you do, because you just got to have fun in this life, because you're going to be working 2/3 of it. And if you don't like what you do, then look for something new.
True. Well, thank you, Professor Gill. Thank you for listening to the Paralegal or Bust podcast. If you like the episode, hit the follow button. Also, connect with me on Instagram and TikTok as Queen of Pantsuits. Until next time, thank you for listening.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome.